My name is Bob Quinn, and I'm a faculty member in the Center for Positive Organization Scholarship. And I wanted to welcome you this morning to what will be a just wonderful experience together. I'd like to begin this morning by turning some time to Janet Max, who will make a few announcements, and then I'll introduce our speaker.
Hi, everyone. We've been doing Positive Links for several years now, and it used to be that we'd probably get about 25 people. Things have changed. So we're going to change how we announce the sessions. We're going to actually put all the information on the website and just ask that you do let us know if you're coming. We'll figure out exactly how that will work by our next session. But we're so excited that we're getting in so many people for these sessions. We're getting a lot more MBA students who we welcome very much to our sessions. And one change we're going to make is we're going to ask you to bring your own drink. But we want to be as open and inclusive as possible, and that change is going to help us do that. So back to Bob.
We've outlined a 3-semester. Oh, and I also wanted to have Paul Jones stand up if he would. Paul is. Paul and his good wife are the folks that fund Pause Links and make it possible for you to eat all that good pizza when you come to. Our theme for a series of 9 sessions over 3 semesters is generative practices in turbulent times. That is, when things start to get a bit out of control, what does it mean to come back positively, to have generative practices that make a difference? And today's topic will be about the energy management part of that process. I'd like to introduce our speaker, and I'd like to do it by telling you a story about me that occurred last week. On Tuesday morning, my wife said, "I'd like to go to a movie tonight." Or, "Would you like to go to a movie tonight?" is what she actually said. I said, "Sure." You know, there's this movie opening. In fact, I'm not sure it was Tuesday or Wednesday. Sometime last week, that Superman movie was opening at the Michigan Theater. And I said, I'd really like to see that. And I went out the door to come here and teach. And so I came home, and we got in the car. And my wife was negative, you know. I said, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." I pushed a little bit, and then she said, "I don't want to go see that movie. I wanted to go see the other movie." Now, at that moment, I stopped, and I had a thought. My thought was, you always get to choose. I never choose the movie. This is the only time I've ever had a preference with a movie, and you won't let me go. Now, I didn't just thinking those things. I hope that dynamic sounds a little bit familiar to you, because the moment that I had that thought, I went into the victim role. And it would lead to a dynamic that I couldn't possibly get out of. And that conversation could only go downhill. And the only way to change the dynamic of that conversation would be to change the role I was in. I tell you that story because it's an essential part of introducing our speaker. Gretchen is a highly accomplished academic, and I could go through 10 minutes of accomplishments. But the more important thing to know about Gretchen is that she lives what she teaches. She established her professional identity by doing a number of studies over a number of years on the topic of empowerment. I can say with considerable accuracy, and having spent hundreds of hours with Gretchen in numerous situations, there's never been a moment that she didn't live what she researches and teaches. And as a result, my life and the life of all my colleagues have been continually lifted. She's a generative force in our lives. You'll feel that, and you'll appreciate that as she speaks to us today. Thanks. Gretchen Spreitzer.
Well, thank you, Bob. I asked Bob, he said, "Well, what would you like me to say?" I said, "Just be short and sweet." I didn't realize what sweet meant by Bob's interpretation, so thank you very much. And I hope I actually am able to fulfill that promise of modeling some energy for you today and hopefully creating some positive energy in the room. Although just listening to how hard it was for Bob to get your attention, I feel feeling there's already a lot of good energy in the room. So by way of getting started, let me ask you to take yourself into a different place and time, and that is think about Saturday afternoon and imagine yourself in the big house. Maybe, is anybody there? Okay. Imagine yourself in the big house, and it's the end of regulation time. The score is tied. We're playing Illinois. It's Parents' Weekend. Imagine what the energy is like in the big house on Saturday at that time. Imagine the electricity, the excitement of being there in the highest scoring game ever in the big house and you being part of that. Imagine that you're the 12th man, you're part of the 12th man, the crowd who's there pulling your team forward. All right. Are you imagining? Are you feeling that energy? Okay. Now I want you to go to this morning. Driving, or you're walking, you're biking to your office. You're walking into your office this morning. What's your energy like this morning? You got an extra hour of sleep, right, over the weekend. It felt later than usual. Luckily, I wasn't doing this talk in April where everybody's... So what was your energy like this morning? Was it electric? Were you really excited? Or was it kind of hard to get started on a Monday morning after maybe a really good weekend? Well, today, my goal is to help us all think about how we can move a little bit along our own energy spectrum, get a little bit more of that electricity in our everyday, so that whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's at work, in our professional lives, with our colleagues, with our students, or whether it's in our home life with our spouses and our kids, or our volunteer work, that we have a little bit more energy that we can give. And what I'd like to do this morning is share with you some research that we have been conducting over the last couple years, and then also have you do an exercise, an energy audit that I developed with the help of some of my students over the last couple years. And a couple of my students are here today, so they know a little bit about what that's all about. Okay, so first let me say thank you to my partners in crime, my energy collaborators. And the study I'll be sharing with you is a study with Charlotte Fritz, who's now at Portland State University, and Chak Fu, who I was hoping maybe would be here today, but I don't see him. This is going to be coming out in the Academy of Management Perspectives. A second piece about how energy gets created in organizations is an endogenous process, is a paper with Bob's son, Ryan, and also Chak Fu. That is going to be coming out in the Academy of Management Annals, building on some of those ideas. The energy audit that I'm going to share with you was developed in conjunction specifically with Tracy Grant. If some of you know Adam Grant, that's his sister, and she was my fellow, not last summer, but the summer before, and she helped me with this. And then a big note of appreciation to Jim Lohr and the High Performance Institute. He really got me excited about these ideas about 4 years ago when a group of us went down and went through his 2.5-day workshop on energy management. And so some of the ideas have their roots in the work that Jim does. Okay, so 3 motivations for this work, 3 personal motivations. One is, over the last few years, I've been working on the notion of what it means for people to thrive in their work. And in that research, we've identified 2 key dimensions or markers that people experience when they're thriving. One is when people are thriving, they're learning, they're getting better, they're improving, they're growing in an important way. That's one dimension. The second dimension is about energy or vitality, that people feel like they have, their workplace is a place that creates energy for them. And so I've really gotten interested in this one dimension, the specific dimension of thriving that is about energy, because I think we don't know very much about human energy. So that's one motivation kind of on a professional side. A second one is to help my students better manage their energy. So whether it's executives that I work with or my undergraduate students in my change course, I know they struggle a lot with energy issues. They struggle with sleep issues, they struggle with stress, and how do they have the energy to accomplish the goals that they're wanting to seek? And so I determined that it might be helpful to have those kind of conversations in the classroom. And then the third is to help me manage my own energy. I love my job. My job could be 24/7 if I let it, but I also have a wonderful family at home, 2 kids, a husband, lots of things going on the home front, and so I have to make sure that the energy that I use in the workplace is not at the expense of me being able to be a good mom and a good spouse and a good friend outside of the workplace. So a lot of this is also driven by my understanding of how can I do this work in a way that produces energy so that when I get home at the end of the day, I still have energy for my personal life. Okay. Well, why does energy matter? Well, it's probably pretty obvious, but just in case, if you don't have energy or positive momentum, it's going to be hard to achieve your goals. And I often talk about this specifically in the context of change, my change course, but Turbulent Times, which is this series, if you're living in a time of change or a time of turbulence, we know that there can be quite a bit of resistance in those circumstances. The direction might not be clear, which way we need to go, and so there's likely to be resistance. Turbulent times bring uncertainty and high probability, potentially, of failure because we don't know the direction that we should go. Change also takes time. We can't expect fast solutions to difficult situations, and that can require a lot of demands from the job and even long hours. And one result is that you can feel burned out. So with my students, we talk about, well, how do you self-regulate your energy so that you can be an effective change agent over time, that you can sustain your initiative to be successful over the long term as a change agent. So before going any further, let me define how we're defining human energy in our research. And we really see it as a resource that people can use to regulate their behavior at work. And we talk about it in 2 ways. One is kind of the positive manifestation of energy, that's subjective vitality. Work by Ryan and Frederick measured subjective energy as positive feelings of aliveness, spirit, and alertness. And we look at it specifically in the context of work. But that's an indicator of positive energy. The lack of energy we measure in terms of fatigue. So are you feeling worn out, sluggish, exhausted? So it's an indicator of the depletion of human energy. So we kind of look at it from both sides because we suspect some things might create a lot of vitality but also be exhausting, and other things might create a lot of physical exhaustion but still create a lot of subjective energy. So we wanted to look at both pieces together. All right. We know from a lot of research that's been done that work can deplete energy, especially emotional labor has been shown to have a lot of depletion where you're dealing with difficult customers or difficult colleagues. We also know in today's day and age with a lot of job insecurity that creates stress, that can deplete energy, whether it's your own job insecurity or losing coworkers and potentially taking on additional responsibilities on their part. And in fact, there's a whole let me come back to these. There's a whole literature that's focused on the recovery process. How do people recover their energy? And all of this research on the recovery process is that people need to do things outside of work to regenerate their energy so that they'll be able to be effective at work. So what people do in their evenings, on their weekends, on their vacations, in order to improve their mood, to decrease strain, and to restore performance capability. So a large body of research, very well done body of research with a lot of longitudinal research, a lot of field work, and they've been able to identify that, and this is important to know too, as a takeaway for you, that the kinds of things you do outside of work can matter a lot for the energy that you have at work. So, for example, activities that are relaxing are going to be restorative. Experiences that allow you to create mastery or learn new things outside of work, even if they're not relevant to your work, so taking a cooking class or learning to, snowboard, those kind of mastery experiences are also experienced as restorative. A sense of control, so doing activities where you feel like the locus of control is internal rather than completely shaped by outside. And then psychological detachment, so getting away from work, not always checking, what's happening on my BlackBerry, or, taking phone calls at off hours, but actually detaching and not thinking about work. For those of you that are young, having kids is the best way to get psychological detachment. They will keep you completely, unfocused with work. But those are important, and they've been shown to be quite effective, all four of those strategies for restoring energy off hours at work. But what we were really interested in, Charlotte and Fu and I, is, well, that's true, but our recovery time is scarce. We're working long hours. We carry our BlackBerries or our smartphones, and we're not completely detached from work a lot of times, the heightened job security that we talked about. And, with being part of a dual career marriage or a single parent or other activities that we have, you don't always have time for recovery or detachment or relaxation. There just isn't the space for it. So if we don't have time outside of work to recover, we're really interested in, are there things that you can do in the workplace to recover your energy? Does it just have to be, okay, I'm going to do all these things on my weekend so that then on Monday morning I'm jazzed up and ready to go? Well, we think that's probably not a very sustainable system anyway. If we could figure out what people do at work, in work time, maybe it's breaks, or maybe it's how they do their work that can be restorative, so that at the end of the day, not only do they not need all of these recovery activities at the end of the day, but they have energy for the rest of their lives as well. So that was our major research question. How does this happen? Can it happen? And so we started with a very exploratory study to try to understand what kind of activities people self-initiate at work to manage their energy. Okay, so let me share with you a little bit. There is a little bit of research that looks at breaks. Interestingly, most of it is in the realm of ergonomics. So if you're on the assembly line or if you're doing physical labor, the kind of breaks that you need to avoid strain or repetitive stress or carpal tunnel or something like that. So most of the research that's been done has been in that realm, or how to avoid accidents is another example. There was one very interesting study in 2008 in the Academy of Management Executive that looked at service employees and how they recovered their energy in the doing of their work. And they measured the different kinds of things that people did, both chores, so they talked about breaks where people did chores, like running an errand or preparing for something they had later in the day. And they also measured what they called respite breaks, which are times where somebody would go out and get a coffee with somebody, or relax, meditate, do something different. And they found that these respite breaks are really important for recovery and for service performance after the break. But the chore breaks actually reduce service performance. So if you're doing these breaks, even though you're doing something different, if it's still something hard that requires self-regulation, when you come back, you're not going to feel really recovered. And so service performance suffers. If you have a difficult customer and you are going to be more sharp instead of understanding and figuring out a way to work through the experience. So that's what we know about breaks, but we don't know very much about the kind of things people do in the doing of their work. Because I don't know about you, but in a lot of knowledge work, we don't have defined breaks. I often work over lunch, or, there isn't a coffee break in the morning in spite of my best intentions. So let me tell you a little bit about the study that we did. Again, quite exploratory. We studied 214 white-collar employees from all different parts of a software development firm. They were about half male and half female, average age about 45. We were interested in what kind of practices they had already, and do they work a lot of hours, and average about a 40-hour work week, but quite a bit of deviation on that. Sleep, they averaged almost 8 hours of sleep a night, pretty good. They drink on average about 3 cups of coffee a day, but again, quite a standard deviation. Think about your colleague who's drinking 5. And they're pretty good exercisers, 4.3 times a week. Now, I have to tell you, these are self-report, okay? But it was all private. Nobody was identified in the study, but you kind of wonder when you see 4.3 times a week. Even though they did have an on-site health club, is it used that much? I'm not sure. Okay, so that was our sample. We asked them the extent to which they used the following strategies to manage their energy at work. And through other exploratory work with a number of different groups, knowledge workers, we identified 22 different kinds of micro breaks that people could take and 20 different strategies that they could use in the doing of their work to recover their energy. So now, some of these things, I'm going to show you what they are in a minute, some of these things you might do ordinarily. Like one is, go to the bathroom or drink water. You might do those things anyway, but we're asking the question specifically, do you use this as a strategy to manage your energy at work? Okay, so it's not just do you do these things at all, but do you explicitly set out with this as a mechanism for managing your energy? And then we looked at both of those 2 markers of energy. So subjective vitality, feeling alive and vital in your work, and then fatigue. So those were the 2. So these are the micro breaks that we identified. So a lot of physiological things: drink water, have a snack, drink some caffeine, take a nap. Thought that was kind of interesting. In terms of social, check in with a family member or friend, show compassion to someone in need, make plans for the weekend, send personal emails, talk about common interests like sports or something that you have in common, a hobby that you have in common. And then a whole bunch of kind of non-work kind of activities. Run an errand, look out the window, read for fun, daydream, shop, surf the web, listen to music, write in a journal, get some fresh air, and meditate. So those were the range of things that people identified as strategies that they used in terms of breaks from work. So things that weren't done in the doing of work, but maybe parallel or alongside of work. And maybe there's some others that, when we kind of get to the next step, if there's others that you do, it would be interesting to hear if this isn't a very complete set. Okay, then we also identified a whole bunch of things that people talked about as using to manage their energy, but they were more work-related, things they did in the doing of their work. So things like, okay, well, I'm feeling tired, I'm going to take a break and check my email. Or I'm going to switch to another task. I'm going to explicitly think, okay, I've kind of got as far as I can here. I feel stuck. I'm going to do something else. Or make a to-do list. Or check or update your schedule. Clean up the office. Make a phone call. Get out of the office. Shut out interruptions. That's kind of the opposite. Shut your door. Have some quiet space. Or delegate. Those were the kind of work-specific things. Other people talked about learning kind of things. Oh, I look for something new to learn, or I set a new goal for myself, or I go out and I seek some feedback. So some learning kind of things where people are trying to get new information. Another set of things were more relational. So, okay, I'm feeling de-energized. I'm going to go make a connection with somebody else. I'm going to talk to a coworker, or I'm going to do something to make them happy. Look for an opportunity to share something or help them with something. Show gratitude. What about people keeping gratitude journals at work? Or even better, telling somebody that you're grateful for something that they did. Or interestingly, a few people mentioned venting about a problem can release energy. And then there were some meaning-related things. Reflect on the meaning of my work, reflect on the difference I make, or focus on what gives me joy. So these were not generated by us. These were generated by not even just people in the software company, but from a whole range of different kinds of knowledge workers about how they manage their energy. So let me just pause. Is there anything up here that is surprising to you or something that we've missed? Seems like a pretty good list. Okay. Oh, Karin? Be part of a committee? That would be a good thing? For Karin, yes, that's true. Depends on who's on that committee, right? If it's going to be energizing or de-energizing. Yes?
Did your email concept also capture social media, like go on Facebook for a couple minutes?
Interesting.
Because I think that the generation,
Interesting. So we collected this data, when was it? It was the year that I was on sabbatical. And maybe Facebook just wasn't as, because that didn't come out as one of the strategies. But I know from my students that they said that is a big one, and how to moderate Facebook use. Yes. Play.
and often we have balls and different things that we just kind of throw around if we want to take a break.
Yeah. I like that. That didn't come out directly. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Seeing read about a problem, it so stands out to me because it seems to me the only one that maybe clearly generating negative. So looking at all at the difference between generating negative and positive energy.
Yeah, we're gonna look at those relationships in just a second. But you're right. That's kind of what we were a little bit surprised about that. But when people talked about it, it was something about I'm releasing this, and that's going to help me feel energized. Yeah.
Is there any way to quantify how much respiration and how fast their transfer is got? So for people who are able to take a 5-minute versus a 20-minute break, meditating compared to socializing, is it very individualistic? Or for people who are trained meditators, for example, and they get much more respiration more quickly, or is it still?
Yeah, I don't think we know the answers to that. I think we're much too early. I think there definitely are individual differences, and there's certainly, we know from meditation that it's really hard at first until you develop that capability and it gets to be more of a habit that comes naturally. So I think that's part of the implications of the work that we're doing is trying to understand better. And I think, I won't give that conclusion yet at the end, but yeah, I think we don't know enough to be able to answer that very clearly. Okay, so kind of coming back to the question that we were just talking about. So which of these, first of all, are most popular? So we have this whole range, 20 plus 22, 42 kinds of energy management strategies in a survey. And we asked people to note which ones that they use on a regular basis to manage their energy. And here's what we found in terms of the frequency or the most common strategies that people used. So check email, drink water, switch to another task, make a to-do list, offer to help someone, talk to a coworker, learn something new, and have a snack. So the ones I put in green are the micro breaks, and then the other ones are more in the doing of work. So these are the things that people, when we looked at a correlation, we saw that, or not a correlation, when we just looked at mean levels, this is what we found. Yes?
The micro breaks, drinking water and having a snack, is the getting up and going to the fountain, getting up and going to the vending machine, or are these, you've got the water bottle at your desk, you've got the snack at your desk?
Yeah, we didn't actually measure getting up. We didn't ask about the getting up part. It was more, are you pulling something out of your drawer, or are you taking a drink of water that you already have? But it could be embedded in there, but we just didn't make that part explicit. I suspect there's something to it, that if you're getting up, it's more of a break than if you're doing it just sitting at your desk. But we can't clarify that distinction. Okay, so that's what those were the most popular. So now the question is, are those the ones that are most related to energy? And so now we're looking here at, which ones had the highest relationship with reports of subjective vitality? So interestingly, some things, learn something new, I thought was on both, but learn something new must be just outside of the top list. Oh, there it is, right at the top. Learn something new, focus on what gives me joy, set a new goal, do something to make a colleague happy, make time to show gratitude, seek feedback, reflect on how I make a difference, reflect on the meaning of work, and meditate. Those were the ones that had the highest association with reports of subjective vitality. Now, in terms of micro breaks, so those were the things in the doing of work. In terms of micro breaks, these were things that are negatively related to fatigue. And I think what this is saying is these are things that when you're feeling tired that you do as a distraction because it's hard to be focused and concentrate. So when people are feeling fatigued, they're more likely to vent. They're more likely to have a snack. They're more likely to have some caffeine, talk about common interests, listen to music, surf the web, send personal email, daydream, shop or smoke, or maybe do Facebook. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, I think it's some of both. This study, we're just looking at correlations. We can't pull that out. But that's something that Charlotte Fritz and Chuck Fu want to do as the next step is a diary study where we're able to look at how energy changes as you're using these different strategies. So I think for these, I think the causality is that when I do things, these create energy for me. The causality for these, I think, is more about when I'm feeling fatigued, I'm more likely to do things. But we need to do the research to tease those out. Okay, so in terms of summary of these findings, it's interesting to us that the strategies that are most commonly used are not the strategies that are most impactful for energy. The only one that overlapped was learn something new. All of the other ones were different. So we're not necessarily doing the right things to best create energy and the doing of work. But what we did find is that three kind of buckets of strategies are most important for people to feel alive and vital in their work. One bucket is about learning something new, more learning-oriented, set a new goal, seek feedback. So this, and I think this part's really interesting because remember at the beginning of the talk I talked about thriving, and thriving is about learning and vitality. Well, it's clear those two things are reinforcing each other with this relationship. So when I'm learning something new, I also feel more subjectively vital. When I'm in a relational connection with somebody, when I'm making a colleague happy, when I'm showing gratitude, I feel more energy. And then meaning related. When my work matters, when it has purpose to me, when I make a difference, those matter too. Emily?
I noticed that there was one finding that was relational. It's kind of surprising that it wasn't the energizer, the talk about common interest. Do you have a sense for why talking about common interest isn't as generative as showing gratitude or some of those other moves?
I suspect it's because that people are using that as a distractor from actually focusing on work. So I'm having a hard time. I'm feeling kind of blah right now. I'm maybe stuck on a problem. I'm going to go walk down the hallway to Kim's office, and shoot the bull about the football game on Saturday. That's my guess of what's happening. I suspect. But again, that's really why we need the longitudinal research to be able to tease out what's happening with that. So, but I think really what's very interesting in here is these learning activities, relational, building connections activities, and meaning, finding more meaning in our work are the things that people report as being most energizing to them. So the question for you is, are you using the best strategies to manage your own energy? And I want to make the shift now to this energy audit that we've created as a way for thinking about how do I best regulate my own energy on a day-to-day basis. So really what Tracy and I did is we tried to create a way for people to take their pulse on their energy. So understand how their energy ebbs and flows over the course of a typical day. And what we actually do is we have people ideally do it over the course of a week. But for purposes of class, we ask them to do it for two typical work days. Can I ask for, Laura, would you mind just sending those around? I'm going to give you a copy of this. But actually what we have them do is from the time that they wake up to the time that they go to bed, and we ask them to do it in real time. So send themselves email reminders or use a ping of some sort on their smartphone to say, okay, it's 9 o'clock. What's my energy level right now? We have them rated on a scale from 1 to 10. And then we ask them to mark, what were you doing at this time? So don't do it quite yet. I'm just giving this to you kind of by way of background right now. So then what we have them do is we have them map their energy over the course of the day on that scale. So on the y-axis is 1 to 10, what their energy level is over the course of the day. And you can see this is one student, and you can see that for her there was a really strong pattern of what her energy looked like in terms of ebbs and flows over the course of the day. And then, can't read this one. I think it's in pencil. But this is what this student's kind of energy flow looked like over the course of the day. So at least for these students, you can see there's a real up and down in terms of how their energy is ebbing and flowing. And then we ask them a few questions at the end of each day. When was your energy the highest, and what were you doing? When was your energy the lowest, and what were you doing? And then what new insights do you have about your energy as a result of looking at this? So I give you a blank copy of this. I can also have Janet send around an electronic copy of this. We feel like it's best if you can do it for a whole work week so that you can see patterns over time. Because certain days you're going to have just things happen that are going to look, funny. But over the course of the work week, hopefully you would be able to see some patterns that are happening where, well, I tend to have a blip in my energy at 10 in the morning, or I tend to have a blip at 4:30 in the afternoon before I head home, so that you can begin to see some patterns, and then hopefully see some patterns in terms of, well, at those times when you had an ebb in your energy, what were you doing at those times? So were those times when you were doing something individual, or maybe something in a group situation? Is that when you were in a committee meeting versus that's when you were working on something really exciting in your work? It's probably different for each of us, and so that's why we do this energy audit, to begin to understand how your energy ebbs and flows. So given our time, we're not going to be able to do that, but I would like to ask you to do a self-reflection kind of across a typical day, maybe even just go back to Friday, or even start with this morning as a starting point, and think about, okay, first thing in the morning when I wake up, how is my energy? Mid-morning, what's my energy like then? By midday, what's my energy look like? End of day, post-dinner, high or low. So just take a minute and reflect for yourself, how does your energy tend to ebb and flow over the course of the day? I'm going to give you just a minute kind of to think about that. And after you've thought about that question, do you feel like there's certain times a day in general for you that your energy is at a low or is at a high? And then what kind of things are you doing when that's happening? Is it irregardless of what's happening in your environment, or is it related to certain things that you might be working on, certain people that you might be interacting with, that are either creating energy for you or depleting energy for you? So think about that. Reflect on that question. What are you doing at the high times? What are you doing at times when you feel like your energy is really depleted? Bless you. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, if you've got some of those thoughts in your mind, is to take a few minutes and talk with somebody sitting next to you about any insights that you had from thinking through your energy flow over the course of the day and the kinds of activities that were linked to your energy. So pick a person or two sitting next to you, share any insights that you have, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what you can do. Yes.
One thing that hadn't been mentioned in terms of creating energy was just kind of being silly. Like when I was talking about a place like that, some place that she worked where they would do sort of silly things that would really motivate them and they would get so all these stupid, boring, mundane tasks would be going because they were silly.
So can I call on my two students to give an example?
One thing that we've been doing in our class to kind of keep energy high throughout is there's a group of usually 3 students that are assigned to kind of manage the energy for that day, and they will include a slide of silliness to go somewhere in Mr. Gretchen's presentation. So today they gave out silly bands at the beginning of class, and they were all different animals.
Nope, don't have
a
one.
slide of silliness came up, and everyone has to go around the table and act out the animal they got.
So it's kind of funny. Last class we had guest speakers in, and the slide of silliness was embedded in their talk, and my big worry was I was going to forget to tell them that there's going to be this weird slide come out. But we don't talk about it. Everybody just does it, and then we go back to what we were doing before. And what's really important about, and Emily saw this, what was the slide of silliness when you were in?
I watched her class, and all of a sudden, she flips the slide, and this entire class of undergraduate stands up and thinks girls are the victors. This is what happens at all.
I said, Emily, I'll explain it later. But what the best part about this is it wasn't my idea. If it was my idea, it would have been a dud. But it was their idea, and they're the ones that make it work each class period. And it does. It usually comes, in the middle of a point where we're all feeling a little bit, Monday morning, a little tired, and people get up and who had the question about standing up? I think there's probably a piece of that where you're not just, you're actually getting the body moving. Okay, Kim, you had your hand up.
You can work on this, and I don't want to deflect you, but I'd like to have you potentially address it. Some energy, if you use it, it depletes. Some energy, if you use it, it escalates. And so we've all had experiences where we're very much energized, but it's not the big house. It's very different kind of energy, so you then work on different forms of energy. I don't know if you want to...
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Florence, who's in my class, had that same question in class. It's like, well, do we really want the highly activated energy all the time? And under some circumstances, that might be really, like when you really need creativity, that might be really important, or where you're doing something social or interactive. But there's other times where you need calm energy. So where you have the focus and the attention, and I think flow might be an example of kind of that calm energy. And I think for the kind of work that many of us do as knowledge workers, we need that calm energy too. So we need to resonate with, we want positive energy, but sometimes that positive energy is highly activated. We're excited, we're kind of hyper, and then other times we need the calm, focused energy. And I think we don't, in the study I presented earlier, we don't parcel that out in terms of understanding what things lead to calm energy versus, we just talk about positive or energy, subjective vitality. But I think that's a really good, important point, that there's times where we need certain kinds of positive energy in the work that we do, and recognizing when that is. Yeah, Janet? Yeah. I think all we had up there is get some activity, take a walk was on there. But yeah, taking a break and really going and working out. Google is really great about getting their people out on a regular basis and working out. Yes?
Talk about anything in terms of temporal pace, about, not everybody needs activating energy at the same time. People need the... So did you talk about how that dynamic flows? How somebody who's physically active could drain somebody else's
Yeah.
Get away from
I think that's a really important question. How this works in groups, and we know energy is contagious in groups. So, but I would guess, I'm trying to think. I don't know of any research offhand, but where people's energy styles could be quite different. And somebody needs calm energy at a certain point, and they've got somebody, who's, all pumped up with a different kind of energy. And so I would think it would be very interesting to look at this in group settings. And we haven't done that research. Yeah?
What about for the circadian rhythm or biorhythmic energy of people who are really energetic in the morning?
Yeah, yep. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do with the audit in terms of understanding this flow across the day, and that flow is going to be different for different ones of us, and that if we can see those patterns over time, even to the point, look how consistent this is in terms of highest and lowest. And so if you know it's 4:30 in the afternoon, then you know those are the times when you need to find the right kind of activities that will work for you. So absolutely. I think this is, a lot of it is influenced by our circadian rhythms. Okay, so let me now share with you the next thing that we do in the energy audit is get people to think about, well, what could they do differently in their everyday life? And when we created this exercise, we didn't have the findings yet from the earlier study, but we've got those now. So keep those in mind as you're looking at this energy intervention. And we used the framework that Jim Lohr and his colleagues created, which says that there's 4 different kind of ways that you can re-energize yourself. And the book I'd recommend on this is Jim Lohr and Tony Schwartz, The Power of Full Engagement. Managing energy, not time, is the key to high performance and personal renewal. It's really a nice practical guide to kind of some of the practice of doing things. And then Tony Schwartz had a kind of follow-up that just came out this year. The way we're working isn't working. The 4 forgotten needs that energize great performance. And it's a pretty nice follow-on to this. But what we've done, Tracy, oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I want to make sure you correct me. Did you say that managing your energy is more important than engagement? To talk about engagement? Or I thought energy was
Sorry.
about managing energy and engagement.
Managing energy, not time, is the key to high performance and renewal. So what they're saying is it's not about how much time you have, it's about how much energy you're putting into being fully engaged. That's his assertion, their assertion. Robin and Florence, if you don't mind passing that, I have a handout for you that kind of summarizes what we saw with our students in terms of the kind of things that would allow you to strategies that kind of fit into each of these 4 buckets. And again, you may have some other ones, but these are ones that we tried to look at. So where Lohr and Schwartz are basing a lot of their work on the practice of professional athletes, we're trying to look at what does the research show. And this isn't my research. This is research in the literature that shows about how you can do these things. So in terms of physical interventions, Janet, this is, true to your heart. Exercise, and it was very interesting just this morning on NPR, there was a story about the common cold and about who catches the common cold and who doesn't catch the common cold. And they said 2 things that differentiate when exposed to the common cold, who gets it and who doesn't get it, 2 variables that are really critical. Did anybody hear this story this morning? The 2, pardon me? It's from Carnegie Mellon, and one of them is from Carnegie Mellon, was Sheldon Cohen, who actually came and was part of one of our conferences a couple years ago. His variable that he found that was so critical was sleep. He found, let me give you, people who slept less than 7 hours were 2 times more likely to get sick than people who slept 8 hours or more. So pretty big differential if you want to avoid the cold. And I laughed at Janet this morning. We know now why Janet was sick with the cold last week, because she was at the rally to restore sanity on a bus for 2 nights. So that proves it. The other big indicator was exercise. And in this study, they found that people who exercised for 20 minutes or more 5 days a week had 40% fewer illnesses. So just kind of hot off the press in terms of research that is continuing to back up these findings. So what Lohr and Schwartz recommend in terms of exercise is interval training, where you're really getting your heart Cardiovascular up 3 to 4 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes, and then strength training once a week where you're actually engaging your muscles. In terms of nutrition, they advocate eating breakfast, really important, and eating smaller meals more frequently to speed up your metabolism. These again, are recommendations for energy. They're not just about health in general, but about energy. They also talk about eating a balanced diet with not just carbohydrates in your snacks, but fat and protein as well. And then, of course, to reduce empty calories like sugary snacks. The other book I wanted to recommend to you, kind of on this topic, Kim, of calm energy, you asked about calm energy. This is Robert Thayer's work, who actually does a lot of research that shows what are the kind of things that lead to that kind of calm energy and focused attention that we all need to get our work done. And they did quite a few experiments about food and exercise, and they found that exercise was much, much more potent for sustained energy, where a sugary snack would hype you up for, an hour. It was the exercise, getting out and taking a walk, something as simple as that led to longer-term focus and attention. So another really good book I'd recommend, Robert Thayer. And then in terms of sleep, it was really fun in my class this semester. We had a student whose dad is the sleep expert at Beaumont Hospital, and he runs all these sleep clinics. And it was like, wow, can you validate whether the recommendations we're making are true? And he said, I'll write up a whole set of recommendations for the students. And so that was really neat. But the book I'd recommend in terms of sleep is this book by William Dement on the promise of sleep. And he talks in here about this notion of sleep deprivation and how much that affects cognitive processing and the ability to get work done. It's almost like if you're without good sleep for 3 nights in a row, you're like driving drunk. I mean, in terms of the kind of cognitive processing that you can do. So pretty important and interesting stuff. One of the most important things that they talk about, too, is trying to get in a sleep rhythm where you're going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time each day. And that's really hard to do when you fit weekends in, but really potent in terms of really being able to get a good night's sleep. And that's why we all get a little bit messed up, even when we get an extra hour of sleep. Why we're all, for a few days, just a little bit mixed up. Okay, so those are physical interventions, and a lot of research that shows that those are important for not only feeling physically energized, but also cognitively energized and focused. Oh, one other book I wanted to recommend to you on this subject, and that is a book that came out last year called Spark, The Revolutionary New Science of Exercise in the Brain, which really makes the link between physical exercise and sharpened thinking, memory boost, and mood. So some really interesting research that's embedded in here as well. John Ratey, R-A-T-E-Y, M.D. Okay, so those are physical energy interventions. Let me move quickly through the other ones. Mental interventions, 2 big ones. One is minimizing multitasking. There's a lot of research, actually interesting research, that comes out of the University of Michigan Psychology Department that shows that multitasking really decreases mental speed and creates more errors. If you really need something where you need concentration and your full attention, you really need to find ways to, one, turn off the smartphone, get away from your email so that you can really be focused. And then a second one, in terms of mental intervention, is to take a break, just to detach from your work for a short period of time. And we know from the research that I presented earlier that chore breaks aren't as restorative as respite breaks. So not just trying to get other things done during your break time, but actually taking a few minutes of kind of calm, get centered, take some deep breaths, just get away from work for a little bit. And there's also really interesting work out of the University of Michigan School of Natural Resources on the importance of nature. So even something as simple as looking outside at the leaves changing, or no leaves left, it can be restorative. But even better if you can get out and take a walk and be in nature. They've shown that to be really especially restorative, work by the Kaplans. Okay, emotional kind of interventions. We offer two research-based interventions here. One is to try to experience more positive emotions, and a number of you talked about silliness and play this morning, and we shared with you our slide of silliness, but find ways to build more positive emotions into your everyday work life. We know from Barb Fredrickson's work about their potency and broadened thinking and building more resources. They can also undo the negative emotions that it's so important for building resilience. And we know those have profound effects on, smiling and laughter have profound effects on mood. So that's one set. How do we bring kind of more positive emotions? And maybe it's, I think somebody else brought up just doing fun things at work, finding ways with your colleagues to engage in a bit of fun or a bit of play. But another one is by acting in kind ways. So doing something for others is also a potent way to build energy in an emotional way. So we know from some of Stephanie Brown's work over at the School of Medicine that there are better health effects for giving than receiving help. So look for opportunities to offer help from somebody. And it's even been found to be contagious. Seeing acts of kindness not only affect the recipient of the kindness, but people who see that or witness that act of kindness. And it was kind of fun. Last year in my class, we had the inventor of the Do Good iPhone application come into my class. Mitch was there for that. And that was a lot of fun. They had a class, an engineering class. Actually, this is just a great example of kind of job crafting. They had this engineering class where they had to create an iPhone application. And they thought about what they wanted to create and who they wanted to impact by their iPhone application. And they wanted to understand social contagion, but they also wanted to do something that would make a difference in the world. So they created this Do Good app. You can download it yourself. And each day it sends out a do good deed. So it might be like, buy the person behind you a Starbucks, or leave some money on the laundromat dryer for the next person in line, or take a minute to leave a Post-it note on a bathroom mirror with a note of encouragement, or something. And he came and he told the story, and it was really interesting. He said that after about 3 or 4 months, they realized they were running out of good deeds to put on. They were like, what are we going to do? This is, our strength is about, creating the technology to do this. How are we going to do this? So they found a local campus group called Do-RAC. What's that stand for? Do Random Acts of Kindness. There's an organization on campus, and so now they outsource that organization to come up with the do good deeds. And if they hadn't done that, they might have, lost the energy. So they found out, this plays to our strengths, and it lets this group play to their strengths. And the application just got bought out by a company, and they're going to try to take it even bigger. All right, emotional interventions and spiritual interventions. I think sometimes my students get a little bit uneasy when they see, oh my gosh, she's going to talk about spiritual interventions. But a few things that come out with this, a large literature and growing literature on gratitude, the importance of gratitude. Does anybody keep a gratitude journal in the room? Okay, quite a few hands. That's terrific. So something as simple at the end of the day, just have a little notebook and write down several things that you're grateful for that happened that day. Pretty simple. But the one that's been found even more potent in terms of gratitude in the literature is writing a gratitude letter to somebody. That has more profound, longer-term effects if you go and write a letter to a former teacher or somebody who made a difference in your life, and then deliver that letter. It takes a bit of courage to do that, but can you imagine being the recipient of that letter? All right, so gratitude is one. Another set is focus on what's meaningful to you. So you could do the same thing as the gratitude journal, but talk about, okay, what are my life goals? Where do I want to go? How do I want to make a difference in the world? And research has found powerful effects about writing or journaling on what's meaningful to you. And then there's also other things like prayer in your everyday life. I had a number of students who came up to me afterward and said, you know what, that's really a powerful reminder to me about putting daily prayer, or meditation, or both yoga and Tai Chi also have a spiritual dimension to them. So those are a variety of different possibilities, and Then in my class, we talk about, well, which one or which set of these most resonate with you? Which one of these, as you look at the ebbs and flows in your own life, which one of these would you want to engage? What can you add to your routine? And then we ask them to go and try. So we ask them to commit. They write down one or two that they want to try, and then they go out and they try it. And then we come back in the next class, usually if that's a Wednesday, like the next class is a Monday, and we ask them to report on what they tried, and then encourage them to keep going. And I don't know, Mitch, a whole year later, are you using any of these? I didn't see Mitch since a long time, but any of these things still resonate with you? Yeah. So I would just ask you guys to do the same thing for a minute and think about, is one of these interventions compelling to you? Is there a new habit that you could create that would allow you to address some time in your day when energy tends to be at a low point? What could you commit to? So just take a minute. You've got a handout. You can write at the bottom of it what you would want to do. And then we'll come back in a minute and we'll open for questions. But I'll just ask you to reflect for a minute on that. Together. We just have a couple minutes before we depart. Let's just open it up. Questions, concerns, other ideas, other interventions that you've tried and found impactful? Yes? Yeah. Again, I think the only research that's been done on that notion of frequency is around the exercise and the nutrition, and I think the idea is more often, even if lower frequency, is better. I think the gratitude research, they found that daily is the best in terms of frequency. I don't know, maybe others know about other in terms of frequency. Yeah. Almost like your visualization introduction, have that kind of attitude and mindset as long as possible. I think the challenge is to create a habit, and that's what we talk about in classes. If you can do this for 3 weeks, you're likely to create a habit. And it's harder to create a habit if you're doing something just once a week than if you're doing it a little bit every day. At the same time, I think what I really encourage students to do is not to try too much, to pick one thing and try to stick with it. And then you can always add things, but if you try to do too many things at once, it gets burned out. But I know some of the research on the gratitude stuff looked at changes over time and how long it sustained even after they stopped doing the gratitude journals. And I think the gratitude journals led to really high well-being while people were doing it and then for a period of time afterward. But the gratitude letter is the one that the tail was much longer in terms of having long-term impact. So try to create a habit, I guess. Sally? Mm-hmm. Also, I just want to tell you, Mhm.
That's the word.
Mhm.
And then going through your whole thing. Can I get a copy of your?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was saying to somebody who was saying they didn't get one of the last handouts, if Janet is comfortable sending that out to the people who are here, or.
Right, but I'll send an email out to the whole Insight T group. I could do the slides if you like. And then I also thought I would put together the listing of the books that you recommend.
Okay, good idea. Right, good idea. Thanks, Sally. Okay, yes.
Able to find, to sort of differentiate the difference between the psychological and the physical, the taking care of yourself physically and the taking care of yourself spiritually and psychologically. Were you able to differentiate those as people were paying attention to them and improving those? What were you finding and how that contributed to energy levels?
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to think about any of these individually. I mean, if you look at even exercise, some of the big effects are cognitive, mental kind of processing. And I think that's true of the emotional piece too, that it gives us energy to then be able to do more things physically. So I think it's really hard to parcel these out for differential effects, because I think they tend to be reinforcing with each other. And so one of the things that I'll often say to groups that I'm using this with is, well, what if you pick an activity like taking a walk that's a physical energy intervention, but do it with a friend. So I'll go out and do it with Janet, and then I'm getting both the mental and the physical and the social piece. And then if we, have something where we're learning something new, we're talking about an article, then we get if we're focused on one article, it would be okay. So, but I think you're right that they are in the best case we're integrating across those rather than focusing just one or the other. So, yeah.
Well, so that got me curious. So I like to run and I don't listen to anything and I run outside, so it feels like running and meditation. So I'm just curious, has anybody done any research about exercising like inside on a treadmill versus outside versus like listening to NPR versus listening to music? Like, do you know if there's any research on?
It seems like there should be. I'm not aware of what it is, but I think part of it is finding what resonates for you. And I think all else equal, I think we have so little quiet space in our lives that if you're unsure, do it without anything, because I think that's when you give your brain a chance just to settle and to be still. And I think that we just don't have enough of that. But that's saying without research to support that. Yeah.
I'm interested in the kind of structural systems of organization and how they might attract from or and for example, if people aren't being paid enough, a lot of energy is going to be looking for a conditioned job.
Mm-hmm.
Available in that situation. Or if they're not respected, or if they're not connected,
Mm-hmm.
connected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Try to find it somewhere else. Or if they aren't recognized as individuals, but rather just as a number.
Yeah.
In other words, all these can detract from the amount of energy that's available. Has anybody done any research on that?
Well, I think that's what that whole recovery literature is looking at, is the demands of work and specific different kinds of demands, and how those lead to the need for recovery off of work. What we were trying to do in our research, and I think really the next step is to understand what kind of organizational mechanisms do we put in place, like the slide of silliness, just as one little teeny example. But what do we do as leaders to create environments where people can have more of this, more opportunities to re-energize in the doing of their work. But in our work, what we were saying is no matter what kind of organization system that you're in, whether it's positive or negative, what are the things that are within your realm of control that you can do yourself? And hopefully, whether you're in a really good environment or a really bad environment, it's helping you move a little bit along the spectrum. But as organizational scholars, I think we're all really interested in even the more important question of how do we create organization work environments that aren't just depleting, but are energizing to people. And I think we've got some clues about that, but that's for another talk. Yeah. Oh.
About the do-good
Why would they count? I agree that that's better in that way, but I think if it gives us the opportunity to look for things maybe that we wouldn't see, that would crowd, our normal day-to-day life would crowd out, then I think, well, why not? But it shouldn't be at the expense of the spontaneous things, but maybe it's creating more opportunities for that. All right, Bob is waving his hands over here that we are...
Let's thank Gretchen for a job well done.